Shankha Chakrasi Dharanam Sahasra Shirasam Shvetam Pranamami Patanjalim Hi, Maggie. All right, so the sutra. Let's look to the sheet that I handed out first, and we'll go through the sutra Sanskrit call and response. This is the transliteration. So, Drishta, Nushravaka, Vishaya, Vitrishnashya. Hey, Jesse. Vashikara, Samya, Vairagyam. So it's Drishta Nushravaka, Vishaya Vitrishnashya, Vashikara Samya, Vairagyam. Okay, Jess. All right. We'll do it one more time with Jesse and Jeff. You bet. All right. All right, Jesse, you're doing good with this. Plug in there. It's 15, okay?
What's that?
It's 15. I'll say it, you say it back.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? Drishta Nushravaka. Vishaya Vitrishnashya. Vashikara Samya. Vairagyam. Yeah. So remember, when there's a long sign over a vowel, you double the duration of the pronunciation of that vowel. All right, so the translation that I have here is non-attachment comes through control over the hold of sensory stimulation. And then I wrote, attachments are often created by the stimuli of our senses, what they receive. We like this, we don't like that. We want this, we avoid that. Patterns are created and preferences are set. Yoga comes along and busts all that up. That's why one of the reasons Richard Freeman says yoga ruins your life. It guides us to greater neutrality and equanimity in our lives so as not to be controlled by the data we receive, the information we get through the senses. In doing so, we lessen our attachments and gain greater ability to cultivate stillness of mind. So it all comes back to yoga chitta vritti nirodha. I always just like to remind myself when I'm working through the sutras that it can be helpful to make those connections back to that second sutra that says yoga chitta vritti nirodha. Yoga is the stillness of the mind, because that's like giving us this very simple guidance on what the practice is meant to cultivate. And, and then we start to learn, like, why would we want to do that? And what benefits do we and everyone else in our world receive because we have better ability to work with our minds, So this is like getting at some of that in a big way. This sutra, of course, is the first in this set of sutras. So this is a set of sutras starting at the 12th sutra and going through the 16th, where Patanjali is talking about abhyasa vairagya bhyam tan nirodha, that yoga is achieved, or is that we get this mastery over thought, or this stillness of mind, through practice and non-attachment, abhyasa and vairagya. And then we had two sutras, 13 and 14, that focused on abhyasa. And now this sutra and the next one focus on the vairagyam, the non-attachment. And this is one that I think is often kind of highly confused. And so I hope that today we can unpack a little bit of that to make it a little more palatable, a little more realistic, I guess you would say, in your own life and in your own practice. Okay, so I always like to turn to the Bhashya first, this commentary that may have come directly from Patanjali himself, but is attributed to someone named Vyasa. Okay, so he says the translation of this sutra is, when the mind loses all desire for objects seen or described in the scriptures, it acquires a state of utter desirelessness, which is called detachment. I think that one thing this kind of emphasizes is that the audience for these original teachings was really focused on working with the scriptures to accomplish some sort of yogic existence. They were full-on yogis, you could say monks or ascetics, and so that was like the initial target audience of these sutras, and that I think that this kind of helps highlight that. But what we could say then is that this focus on the non-attachment kind of has two prongs. It's non-attachment in terms of our material existence in this world that we're living in, and the things that we have that come and go in our lives, material things often. And then also to our attachment to the spiritual awakening, to the experiences we have along the path that we like, and that we then crave. We want more of that, and we want to be enlightened, and so forth. So that can create its own sort of trappage. Okay, so he then has this commentary on the sutra where he says, or they say, when the mind becomes indifferent to things seen, and then the examples given are women, food, drinks, power, etc. So again, it kind of emphasizes that his audience was mostly male, probably all male at the time. When the mind becomes indifferent to these things and does not hanker after objects or states promised in the scriptures, such as going to heaven or having the discarnate state, or of dissolution into primordial matter, or even when in the presence of such things, the mind finds out their defects and by virtue of the acquisition of discriminative knowledge maintains complete freedom from their influence and is indifferent to good or evil, it is said to have reached a controlled state of buddhi without vikalpa, called vashakara samya, and this is vairagya, detachment. That really was all one sentence. It's pretty wild. And vikalpa, as you may recall, comes from an earlier set of sutras that talk about the 5 types of thought, the 5 sort of buckets of thought, vrittis that we're working with. Vikalpa being imagination, or the stuff that we kind of dream up through the creative powers of our mind. And so, he's talking about detachment, our ability to recognize when these things are coming up and we have this strong pull, or it can also be a strong avoidance, a strong push in the opposite direction from something that we are experiencing in life. And so saying that we want to begin to see that and to work with that and to find a little more balance in this equation in our minds. Then when we look to Edwin Bryant, his translation is somewhat similar. It says dispassion, so this is another word that's often used for vairagya, is the controlled consciousness of one who is without craving for sense objects, whether they are actually perceived, so like through the senses, or described in the scriptures. So he, in this translation, then gives us a little more of that delineation between like our perceived experience, our sensory experience of the world, and then our sort of spiritual pursuit and the attachment we may have to what's described in the scriptures, in the sutras, for example. And he then brings up a word that I wanted to then dive into a little bit more. And he does so here in the very first sentence of his commentary on this sutra. He says, after defining practice, Patanjali turns to the second element in this restraint of the mind, vairagyam, dispassion, renunciation. So then when renunciation, for me, that's easier to relate to because it is one of the 4 mind turnings, one of the main contemplations that one undertakes when you step into the Eightfold Path of Buddhism. There are 4 mind turnings or mind changings that one sits with and really works to comprehend, to embody, to experience, to make sure that this is my direct experience. It's telling me that I trust this path and I want to go further in the Buddhist teachings. And those 4 mind turnings or changings are to contemplate the preciousness of human life, the impermanence of everything, impermanence and death, karma, and samsara, but not just samsara, but the renunciation of samsara. It's the renunciation that's really important. And, having been around yoga for over 20 years, often, especially in the early days, whenever I would encounter this, it seemed to me like the examples that were being really held up were sadhus and ascetics who had no possessions, who had, renounced everything, and maybe even renounced their clothes. That seems kind of far-fetched, but especially in our culture, it's pretty difficult to live that kind of life in the United States. Although some of the people that we see that we might think are a little bit cuckoo, maybe that's what they're doing. I don't know, But so this idea of renunciation seemed pretty extreme, and it can be extreme. And one of the things we need to remember is that the Buddha was like, no, you don't need to take things to these extremes. So what we then begin to realize is that path as well, is that the renunciation doesn't mean that just because you have a Range Rover, you're a bad person, you have access, and you have to give it up. It's your attachment to the Range Rover that is the problem that can lead to suffering. So we then, what we're looking at is, and I kind of just do this all the time. I think if someone wanted something I have, could I just let it go? Whatever that is, because in doing that, you can do this sort of internal kind of check to see, like, how attached am I to this thing? How attached am I to this room, this shala? How attached am I to my car? How attached am I to my... But what's the attachment there? What's the energy? What's the pull? And what sort of suffering might that cause? Not now, but also in the future. And the thing is, like, for example, when it does come to your husband or your loved ones, the fact is we have to remember, and what we're working to prepare for is death. Impermanence and death. No one is going to get out of this alive, Come a point when we do have to even let go of that. What sort of peace can we cultivate in that moment when we have to do that sort of ultimate letting go? Because it will come. And, all the teachings say in the yoga world and Buddhism that if we're clinging even to those final attachments, it's going to make that transition harder. So, it's not the easiest thing to contemplate sometimes, but an important one. And I think that one of the things that we really limit ourselves and hinder ourselves in Western culture is by not getting more comfortable talking about death, and also more comfortable with being with the process of death. I was reminded of this so much because today is Saturday. On Wednesday, my friend Sarah McTee, who helps me with the Spiritual Pilgrim, and I don't think she would care if I share this, but we were having our weekly meeting, or maybe bi-weekly. We meet pretty frequently because she works with me to manage and administrate the Spiritual pilgrimages. And we were meeting, and immediately, she texted me just before. She said, I may be late. My mom just called. My grandma's not doing well. And her grandma's quite old. She lives in Arkansas. Her mom's been staying there to take care of her. Sarah was there not long ago. And we knew that this was coming, right? So then she gets on, and we're FaceTiming, and I see she's upset, and she says, it's really not good. I'm trying to decide what to do. Should I go? Should I go? And I was like, yeah, I think you should, because I know her. I know enough to know that it's important to her, that she would want to be there with her grandma in that moment of transition. And that Sarah has put a lot of thought and work into this process herself. And whether her grandmother and she have the same belief system, which they don't, but even regardless of that, Sarah being there and supporting that transition could be helpful to her grandmother as she lets go and moves on. So she did. She booked a flight. She flew out that day, and she got there an hour before her grandmother passed, And it's like you hear stories like that sometimes. And it's a pretty amazing thing because her 3 children were there, and Sarah's a grandchild. But I think there was something about that. An hour later, she passes. Sarah's traveling from Honolulu to Arkansas, which isn't a quick trip. But, it just reminded me of that was important to Sarah. Sarah was prepared for that. Sure, now she's dealing with the aftermath, and that can be draining. But also participating in that can help her with her own work. And Maggie's on here, and Maggie's an amazing example to us all. Maggie's a very young woman, and she just spent the last several months living in a place that, is foreign to her somewhat. She grew up in California. She's living in Buffalo to help her uncle with his transition. And she was there for that, and I applaud you for that, in Buddhism, in Tibetan Buddhism in particular, there's something called the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which is a book that lays out the process that one goes through when they go through the death transition. Because in Buddhism, of course, there is belief that you're moving on to another body. And it helps one to navigate that process. And it's quite a book. It's a lot to process. You go through what are called the bardos. Mingyur Rinpoche talks about the bardos as these gaps in these stages that we move through. And they show up in life as well, so we can start to recognize those and help us prepare. But it's an interesting thing to think about. And if Tibetan Buddhists are together and they're going through that practice, then their belief system does match up, and you can actually be an active, supportive participant in helping that person to transition, which is pretty amazing, I think. So, one of my points around that is that it's so much more a part of their daily life, and not in a depressing way. The other thing that you see in India and in Nepal is the public and open cremation of departed relatives, departed folks, So they wrap the body in white cloth, take it to the river, go into the river, and this is all out in the open, into the river, put water on the head. I'm not exactly sure what the process is. I've observed it. Then they take the body up, put it on a pyre, put the wood around it. Everybody's involved, and everyone is participating in the cremation of their departed relatives. At the same time, this is happening. It gets more active. The time to do it is in the evening, and around dusk. And at that same time, just after dusk, every night in these places, they start what's called arti, which is a really beautiful ceremony to celebrate life and death. People are dancing, singing, there's music, there's fire. And this is happening while this is happening. And and it's really interesting too, because it's like there's a lot of young people, it's quite busy. It's kind of like a night out sort of thing. And it's mind-blowing for a lot of the Westerners that I take there. Some of them have a very adverse reaction to it, which is great. It doesn't matter what your reaction is. What matters is do you sit with that reaction? Do you let that reaction help guide you moving forward and bring a little more understanding to yourself about renunciation and death and so forth? So it's an opportunity for meditation, just like everything else in our lives. All right. Well, I guess I didn't need these books after all, because I just talked away all our time. But there's a couple minutes left. Does anybody have any comments or questions they want to bring up?
I appreciate the importance of sitting with, just being with your reaction, no matter what it is. There's not a wrong one. It's just important to have one.
Yeah.
And be cool.
And again, this does tie back to your asana practice. You're here this morning, you're getting through these yoga postures. Each posture is impermanent. Each posture is bringing up all sorts of sensations within you. Each posture is giving you opportunity to reflect inward. So each posture is, are you attached to that posture? I mean, yes, of course, attachments develop, right? Vrichakasana, I really want to get my feet to my head. Why? So, good opportunities for reflection. Brett, you good?
Oh, yeah. I got into my own political, you know what I mean? I was on a daydream of how you can be dispassionate, deep down, hold the dispassion, but it doesn't mean you can't take action.
Oh, absolutely.
Kind of thing,
Yeah.
But
such a good point.
if you saw, I was on a daydream.
Yeah, no, but that's such a good point, because that's another thing. We don't want to confuse this dispassion or equanimity or impartiality. Doesn't mean inaction. It doesn't mean standing up for what you believe in. Not standing up for what you believe in. It doesn't mean that, But it's about the mind and heart that's behind that. Mm-hmm. We talked about this when I went to a thing that Matt's involved in. We're activists, and I did this class with a group that's they're activists, they're anarchists, And that was part of what we talked about. It's learning to see the motivation and then work to make that motivation more sustainable and positive, but still taking the action that is right.
And I feel like it can almost make people more effective.
Yeah.
There's a political person in town I love, and she's a deep
Marion.
practitioner.
No?
Francie Hunter.
Oh, okay.
And she's a deep practitioner, and she just stays so loving. Like an RBG. She's basically an RBG, And it just makes you so effective.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we could really go. Okay, well, thanks everyone. It was really nice to have this time with you, and we'll just go right into meditation. So on Zoom, you can just stay there. All right. Oh, Martha, thank you. It's nice to have you all here. Oh, Macy's here. Well, you guys can stick on and meditate with us if you'd like. I'll just leave the Instagram on. We're going to go into meditation. So everyone, just go ahead and cultivate. Get set up in your meditation seat. And I was looking for my timer, but of course I can't do that because I have the Instagram live on. So that's all right. I can see the time. So get settled into your seat.
You want me to set you a phone timer so you don't think about it, Corey?
It's okay. It's okay.
Do you all that?
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's so interesting, right? Like one of the great things I've learned from Mingyur Rinpoche, and which I'm going to be learning more about because I'm about to embark on this 11-month teacher training with him, but is that he really emphasizes that when you're guiding meditation, you also practice, which helps so much because in what I say during the meditation comes up somewhat organically. It's generally not planned. So it's kind of like I'm sharing, we're having an experience together, which is great. But I still do look to monitor the time. So it's not like I'm just, it's totally fine. All right. So go ahead and get settled in. And we'll start with the opening aspiration. In English, you're welcome to repeat if you'd like. With boundless compassion and wisdom, I will work for the welfare of all. May we be free from hunger and discord. And have joy in a world at peace. All right. Just settle in. Let your awareness drop down to the base of your body. And just take a moment to appreciate your connection to the earth. And notice whatever sensations you're experiencing there. Some you might like, some you might not. Try to just let that come and go. And just check out the experience. Your seat, asana. And then gradually begin to scan upward through the body. Just checking in, noticing whatever sensations arise as your awareness moves slowly upward in the body. Spine loosely straight and upright, relaxing the rest of your body. Softening the shoulders, subtly dropping the chin, softening your face, allowing a little bit of spread, space between the eyebrows, across the forehead, loosening the jaw. And remember that as we practice, there are no distractions. We can turn distractions into part of the practice. What we sometimes think of as distractions. We're just aware of them and incorporating them into the awareness, which is the essence of meditation. Even thoughts, not trying to stop them, not trying to change them, just let them come and go. And then maybe breathe a little more deeply for 2 or 3 breaths. And let the breath draw your attention into its flow, into its movement, feelings, sensations. And then gradually just letting go of any effort, but let your attention rest in the flow of your breath. For the next several minutes, we'll just work with the breath as the anchor. There's a little bit of doing energy as you continue to cultivate a connection and awareness of breathing. Know you're breathing in. Know you're breathing out. It's perfectly natural to get caught up in thought or for your mind to kind of wander off. Whenever you notice that, you're right back in the meditation. Just letting go and dropping back into the breath. And part of the letting go is to let go of right or wrong or good or bad. It's irrelevant. Just sitting, knowing that the breath is there. Just allowing the breath to be natural. Doesn't matter if it's short or long, shallow or deep. Just as it is. Just follow the full trajectory of your breath. Comes in, down, and back up and out. Using this shamatha, calm abiding, to steady your awareness. Coming back to the breath. You're not trying to block anything out. Notice the doing energy behind staying with your breath. I'm going to invite you to let that go, transitioning from doing to just being, letting go of your breath, allowing your mind to be open and free, expanding outward from your center in all directions. There's nothing to do, not even meditating. Just sitting, open awareness. One 100% present, not grasping for anything. Just letting go and allowing your mind to rest. Just as it is. Whatever sensations arise, whatever thoughts come, sounds, just let them come, let them go. There's no limits on your awareness. It can expand infinitely. Or stay close to home. Doesn't matter. Just keep letting go. Relaxing the body. Resting the mind. If your eyes have been closed, maybe just let them softly open. Not really looking for anything, but just letting in the light. Letting your gaze be soft. Awareness open. Just share this short reading with you from Mingyur Rinpoche's book, Turning Confusion into Clarity. It says, letting go has wisdom. If we grasp too tightly, we become hopeless. The most important part of this training, this turning the mind from samsara to nirvana, is letting go of grasping. It may come as a big relief to learn that attachment and grasping are the main obstacles to our happiness, not our nice house or our prestigious job. But letting go is not like taking the trash to the dump or giving a used coat to a homeless person. Detaching ourselves from the stuff of samsara might feel more like pulling our own flesh away from our bones. Generally, we cannot jump straight into the mind of non-grasping without giving up anything on an external level. For this reason, the path includes practices that encourage varying degrees of renunciation. Meditation itself expresses renunciation. However chaotic or grasping or consumed with desire our mind may be, we have still stepped away from the pressures of conventional activity to try to work with our mental confusion. That's a big step. All right. Let's dedicate this practice. Repeat after me if you'd like. By the power of this compassionate practice, may suffering be transformed into peace. May the hearts of all beings be open, and their wisdom radiate from within. All right. Thanks, folks.